When we see grey hair, it's easy to assume the follicle stops making pigment, but that framing is misleading. Greying is often a coordination problem rather than a factory problem. A hair follicle is a cycling organ. It repeatedly builds a new strand, rests, and then starts again. And every time it builds a new strand, it has to rebuild the pigment system that colours it. So colour is something the follicle has to recreate, reliably, cycle after cycle. To achieve this reliability, the cells inside the follicle have to act in sync, staying in the right state, activating at the right time, and handing work off smoothly from one step to the next. To understand greying, it helps to think in supply chain terms. The follicle works like a system with two linked zones. The bulb at the bottom of the follicle is the production zone. That's where pigment is made and loaded into the growing hair during the growth phase. But the bulb can't do that alone. It needs pigment-producing cells, melanocytes, to be present and active at the right time. And those melanocytes don't stay there forever. They need to be replenished across hair cycles. That replenishment comes from higher up in the follicle, from the niche, where melanocyte stem cells are maintained and kept ready. So one zone produces pigment and the other restocks the pigment-making cells for the next cycle. And that restocking process is not simple. It's a timed delivery. It's a chain of steps. And it doesn't take much disruption for those melanocyte deliveries to become weaker or less consistent. When that happens, the follicle can still grow hair, but more hairs start coming in with reduced pigment from one cycle to the next. The question is, what makes restocking from the reserve reliable? And now it seems we have the answer. It depends on signalling in the niche. A stem cell has a long path before it becomes a working melanocyte. So how does it know what to do and when the right time is? It follows cues from nearby cells and from the niche environment as a whole. That niche is full of chemical buzz, molecules that act like commands. It's a constant local conversation that keeps the reserve stable. When that conversation gets distorted, restocking still happens, but it becomes less reliable from cycle to cycle. Before we zoom back into pigment stem cells, we need the basic idea of how cells communicate at all. In every tissue, cells keep sending each other cues that basically say, stay quiet, wake up, divide, specialize, stop. Those cues come in different forms. Some are chemicals released nearby, like hormones or growth factors. Some are contact signals that only work when cells touch. Others are electrical or ion shifts. And some are mechanical, like pressure or stretch. But the pattern is the same. One cell sends a cue, another cell picks it up with a matching receptor or sensor, and then it has to turn that outside message into an inside decision. That translation happens through signaling pathways. Different receptors trigger different routes. The same cue can mean different things in different cell types because their internal wiring isn't the same. Small signals can be amplified through molecular switches into a strong response, and once a cell responds, it can pass the message along. And cells don't follow one instruction at a time. They combine many inputs at once, and their behavior is the final vote across those signals. That's why when communication breaks down, the system starts misfiring. Signals can be too weak, too strong, mistimed or noisy, and cells start making the wrong call, like repair staying switched on too long and leaving excess scar tissue behind. After researchers mapped the pigment supply chain and the stem cell niche, the next step was to decode the torque inside the follicle. Signalling becomes central to greying because it's what keeps hair colour stable from cycle to cycle. The pigment supply chain stays reliable because the stem cell reserve runs on a stream of cues with three main jobs. First, they support survival and stress protection, so stem cells don't quietly drop out. Second, they preserve identity, so stem cells keep behaving like stem cells instead of drifting into the wrong fate or being used up too quickly. And third, they control timing, so only the right fraction activates at the right moment in the hair cycle. When those messages weaken, arrive at the wrong time, or become noisy, deliveries start getting lost. The hair shaft can still grow, but more hairs grow in with less of the same paint supply. With time, researchers started mapping specific conversations inside the niche and then testing what they actually do. One important example is endothelin signaling through the EDNRB receptor. It's a direct local conversation between two cell types. Keratinocyte stem cells act as the senders, the caretakers here. They release chemical messengers called endothelins into the local environment. Melanocyte stem cells nearby carry the matching receptor, EDNRB, and act as receivers. When endothelin binds, it switches on signaling inside the pigment stem cells. This pathway is one of the core control lines that keeps melanocyte stem cells maintained and helps guide their activation into pigment-making descendants when a new hair cycle needs colour. As a result, the reserve stays functional across many cycles, and the pipeline stays stocked. A natural next question is whether we can preserve pigment longer by supporting these signalling pathways, and we've seen an important step in that direction. In 2024, a Nagoya study tested this idea in mice. We covered the result in the previous episode. If you watched it, you know that mice given luteolin held onto hair colour longer. But the deeper point is what happened inside the follicle. In luteolin-treated mice, the endothelin EDNRB conversation looked more intact than in controls. The signalling line that helps maintain pigment stem cells and their timely activation stayed stronger. That suggests something practical. One way to preserve the pigment supply chain is to keep the niche environment healthier, so messages stay clear and deliveries stay consistent. And if this can be done one way, it's reasonable to expect other approaches will emerge with enough rigour and creativity.